Also a hugely disappointing afternoon on the south coast as Everton lose by 1-0 against a reasonably poor Bournemouth team. No shots on target. Not sure how you expect to score a goal, Sean, with no shots on target. Real lack of desire I found from the players. Didn't win many 50-50s. Not the slightest idea how we were ever going to score a goal. And frankly, you've got to ask yourself what the plan is. This Bournemouth team's bang average, and we let them really walk through us. The cross could have been blocked. The cross for the goal that Brooks scored could have been blocked, like several others earlier in the first half. Branthwaite, probably the best player for Everton today in my book, in spite of an early booking. The rest of the back four, pretty ineffectual, and the midfield was absent. Mangala useless, rightly taken off at half-time. Up top, injury-prone, Rodger gets injured. Calvert-Lewin comes on and achieves the square root of nothing. Zero pace, zero creativity, zero imagination. Telling that the players who came over at the end of the game were Branthwaite and Patterson, and then latterly Calvert-Lewin. Frankly, I don't know where we go from here. This manager hasn't got a clue. According to my numbers, that is 8 games out of 10 that we failed to score. And Bournemouth were there for the taking today, but if a door was opened in front of us, we wouldn't know how to walk through it. Safe journey home to all the Blues who've travelled all the way down. Much longer trip than I've had today. Up the toffees, and let's get shot of this manager as soon as possible.
Welcome to Blue Monday. The voice you heard just before we started there was a very despondent Rodger Armstrong leaving the Vitality Stadium on Saturday afternoon. Rodger, we've talked over stuff, and Dave and Rob and Matt spoke over the game in some detail in post-match. From you, I want to just, as well as getting your thoughts on the match, I want to get your thoughts on what the sort of atmosphere like with the crowd was, because looking on social media, basically, I can't really see many people still backing the manager. I think the stats speak for themselves. But what was the atmosphere like in the ground? Was there any hostility? Does it feel like it's getting towards that sort of end of Martinez toxicity, or what was it like?
Hi. The highlight of the day for me was actually being able to get a Guinness in a bar before the match, because there's massive shortages of Guinness nationwide, and that was washed down with a large Jameson. Without either of those, I think the match would have been even more disappointing than it was. The atmosphere was bizarre. I mean, obviously, a lot of people have travelled a long way. I had a 20-minute bus ride, so and they'd obviously got up early. And it's a small allocation. It's quite an intense, I know everyone's always packed in, but the area I was in was safe standing as well. And the thing I took away from the match was that actually most of the fans couldn't be asked to watch it. There was no rush to the seats, even at 5-3. And certainly at half time, I went down to beat the queues, and there were loads of people down there. And I think I got back up 10 minutes into the second half. Now, does that make us bad fans or bad supporters? I don't know. There's absolute disinterest. There's nothing to watch. The football's dreadful. Indirectly, I did hear, I was stood next to John Blaine, and as I got up there, he said he'd had to endure a 5-minute lecture from one guy who talks at him to tell him why Sean Dyche had saved Everton Football Club. That was the only positive Dyche noise I heard, and that's kind of third hand. There was quite a lot of hostility as soon as the goal went in, quite a lot of hostility towards Mykolenko in particular. I think a lot of frustration towards lumping it long. Talking to a few people, during the game and then sort of around and about at half time. A lot of anger, I think, towards Calvert-Lewin because he's phoning it in. I mean, his stats were terrible. I think he touched the ball. He was on for over 60 minutes and he touched the ball 17 times. He didn't have any shots, and he won 2 of the 7 aerial duels he had. So if you're going to lump it long to him and he can't win the ball, what's the point?
Yeah.
The football was terrible. Bournemouth was so much better than we were. I know I said I thought that maybe Branthwaite was our best player. Clearly it was Pickford, because Pickford made 3 saves, 2 certainly very good in the second half, and 1 in the first half. Sort of flick on low down to his right, almost in front of us. So really, on the balance of play, Bournemouth probably deserved to win by 2 or 3 goals. We had no answer. It was a shame that, we kept the hope until the 78th minute. It might have been easier if we conceded in the 7th, and then the game would have been over. I think the fans have had enough of him. We've had enough of him for a long time. And you take the temperature at an away game. There wasn't much excitement. There wasn't much singing. There was no motivation, and people were just having a beer with their mates. And that only lasts so long, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think for me that level of despondency, I think the last time I really felt that was possibly, or the last time I can remember. I mean, with Benitez, it was just anger at the fact that he'd been given
Yeah.
it in the first place and how that badly that went. It was with Allardyce really that I felt sort of that level of sort of disinterest. But obviously with Allardyce, we weren't in any sort of danger of going down ever, regardless of what he
Mhm.
says. That team was not going down that season. It
No.
feels a bit dangerous for me, Dave. I don't know what you think about that, though. The fact that, and it is like this at home as well, there's an air of indifference from everyone. And I think when you're in the position that the team's in now, where we are 1 point off the relegation zone, for the fans to have that feeling of indifference, it feels quite dangerous to me.
Mm.
It's not something that you can necessarily drag yourself out of, because when I go to the game, I feel exactly the same. I'm just turning up because that's what I do. I'm not getting like angry at anything, and I am feeling that indifference. But I think collectively, if everyone's feeling like that, it feels a little bit dangerous, doesn't it? When I guess the team probably need us to sort of pull them through a bit, but can we do that again?
No, I'm in the same perspective, but we should be angry. We should be worried.
Yeah.
And that's because you start. I've used this term quite a lot this season. You start sleepwalking yourself into a state of you are that fed up, and you have that much of a generalized opinion towards Sean Dyche. Like Roger said there, for a long time, we've all felt as if he needs to go, because he's not, or because it doesn't seem like he is. It just becomes mundane to go to games because you know what you're going to see. Um, but you do turn your eye to the Premier League table. I watched Fulham against Ipswich. Ipswich are miles better than us, by the way in which they play football. But also, we were ironically reliant upon Marco Silva's side to take a point against Ipswich. Otherwise, I think we would have moved down to 18th or 17th
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
They'd have gone a point ahead of us if they'd have won the game.
Hmm.
yeah. And you think they've sort of been tipped as what Luton were like last season, sort of fun to watch, but they're never going to get many points and whatnot. I think there's a little bit more substance to them. But in regards to us there, I think Roger, you said that perfectly, you indicated that perfectly, what you see in the games, and you've echoed that as well, Les, where I feel as if when we're going, it's there's an apathy towards things. And I think what is dangerous is that whilst it's consistently happening, it becomes the Everton way. Do you know when you mentioned there, Roger, about nobody rushing to the seats, people staying down there for a drink or something to eat or whatever, don't mind getting there late. Les, as much a joke and have a laugh with you about leaving early. That sort of thing is the Everton way right now, and who can blame anybody for that? Um, because it's got to a state now where we're starting to fight for our lives in the Premier League, and he came in, and I think it's quite funny. He came in at this stage, didn't he? Maybe a bit later
Mhm.
down the season, he came
Yeah,
in
it
to
was then
save
end
us.
of January, I think, wasn't it?
That game against Arsenal, which is probably the peak of his career and his tenure at the club. We're sort of, it'll feel like shortly that we're crying out for somebody like that to come in and do what he has. Now, whilst we're going round in that merry-go-round, it's pretty obvious that needs breaking through by our new owners. I hope and I think that they've been assessing this and thinking this can't continue. The two home games we've got coming up as well. I think we do really, really well to get a point at home to Aston Villa or Spurs. I know Spurs have got some serious issues there, but who's the team you want to play if you're Spurs, if you're Ange Postecoglou? Who's the team you want to go and play? It's Everton. And I found it interesting this morning. It was last night. I was just searching through the club's Twitter, and the war cries are back. The war cries, nice early start to the year with the war cries. It's Abdoulaye Doucouré, no less, who's talking about how the manager's behind them, and they're going to turn things around, and they're going to go over all this and all that, and basically could just copy and paste some of the shit we used to get from Phil Neville and Seamus at times, and Tim Cahill back in the day, where a poor run of form. It's we're all behind you as fans. We need you. Blah blah blah. And it's interesting you mentioned Branthwaite. Rodger is our best player, which I completely agree. It might have gone by the wayside to all of the other stuff that we've been speaking about and looking at after the game. He came out and complained about Branthwaite for the
I know.
goal that
Yeah, I was going to make
Bournemouth
that point
scored, which
actually.
I
Yeah,
found extraordinary to say what he
I
did.
thought so. I thought it was really. I mean, I've watched it so many times, different angles. He does appear to duck under it, but is he ducking under it? Of course he isn't. I thought it was an extraordinary thing to do and say. And what I did notice, I'm sorry for butting in, but what I
No,
noticed
no.
during the game, particularly in the first half when Pickford was at our end, as it were, with just to the side of the goal Pickford was defending, number of occasions Branthwaite was calling for it, screaming for it to be rolled out to him so he could play it. He was move out to the left, Tarkowski out to the right. If he rolls it to Tarkowski, Tarkowski passes it back to Pickford and Pickford lumps it. What's the fucking point? Come on, that's ridiculous. Branthwaite wants to play out and Pickford's telling him, no, get up the pitch. And Branthwaite's shaking his head, going, what are we doing? All you're going to do is lump it long and we're going to lose it and give it straight back to them. So, I do think Branthwaite's not a happy lad and you can understand why, because that team, it's not doing his career much good playing in that team.
I think
There was a last
Sorry,
few games I've seen him. There's a John Stones look about him now for me, in which he's getting the
absolutely
ball,
right.
and he's now starting to take it upon himself to move out with the ball. I've seen him a few times when he sort of drifted into the half of the pitch. Which again, I don't blame him for doing that whatsoever. Although it will leave us susceptible because he's our best centre back if they're attacking us. But when Dyche mentions things like that, I mean, it's another thing. It's another feather to add to his cap of coming out with these things that are making us all infuriated about what's going on there. And for doubly to get the war cry stuff, it's we're back into the scenario that we've seen so many times happen at our football club, and it's difficult to watch. I applaud anybody who's gone to the away games. I mean, you feel like you have to anyway to keep your credits, and because we have that good of an away fan base, don't we? But we've spoken many times about the travel down to where you are, Rodger. It's a one hell of a trip to get there and back, to go there and watch what we've seen. And you see nothing from Sean Dyche. I mean, that what he said there, it should be the end of him when he came out and said about we're doing everything but wins. We're playing as well as the only thing.
I'm gonna pick that up in a minute, Dave.
That's one of the worst. That is one, and we've had some players, some managers chat some shit over the years. Lest we forget. But my word, him coming out with what he did there, that is outrageous. It makes you really angry when I heard him say that on Match of the Day. And I know we're going to go through the stats that you've put in our WhatsApp group there, Rodger. That was disgusting. That was basically slapping us all in the face to say that. And the issues we've got.
There was a moment.
Sorry,
just a final comment from the Vitality. If ever there was a moment for Dyche to come over to the fans and actually show the kind of balls that he pretends he's got, that was the game. And I looked across the minute the whistle went, because it's the other side of the pitch, the dugout. I looked across and he just did this and walked down the tunnel. Branthwaite came over, Jordan came over, Tarkowski did, and Calvert-Lewin. But they got nowhere near the touchline. They were kind of standing probably 30, 40 yards back from the fans, gave it a little bit of a clap. Tarkowski probably got the closest. Patterson came over as well. But the rest of them, they didn't want to know. And if Dyche wanted to keep or to regain some goodwill from the fans, he could and he should have come over. £5 million a year. And these people have travelled, the vast majority of them have travelled a long way in horrible, horrible weather conditions, freezing cold, and served with that shite. He should have come over and owned it and taken responsibility for it and not blamed it on Branthwaite ducking out or telling us all we're frustrated.
Do you know, with you saying that, Rodger, that's reminded me of what happened at Brentford that time. If you remember, when the players just wanted to, like, say, about, I don't know, 50 odd yards short of them. And it also reminded me, I don't know if you remember this, just off on a tangent a little bit here. Do you remember when Paolo Di Canio was Sunderland manager and they were playing an away game? This is very, very particular that people might not remember this, but I think it was just before he got sacked there. And we've all been to Bournemouth away, which is it's a decent away end, where you get a West Brom. Sorry, I said Bournemouth, West Brom, and they got battered by West Brom, and he comes over and he just stands there, like hands on his hips, and everyone's just giving him a load of shit and kicking off, and he's just standing there saying, like, nodding his head, because he's got that sort of personality about him, hasn't he? And he got hammered by their fans for doing so. With Sean Dyche there, like you say, there's not many, if any, support left for him. But at the very least, like you said, Roger, at the very, very least, you at least address what fans have gone down there. You address how poor this has been. Have you ever heard him criticise himself? I haven't. I've not heard him criticise anything regarding the way in which he set things up. I think the odd occasion he said that's up to me. That's sort of my responsibility. And he's hanging players out to dry, which going further down that route is, well, we're not looking at these players at times and thinking, you know what, he's really good, he should be doing this. Branthwaite's probably the rarity, Pickford's probably the rarity, and Dye maybe. But you can count them on the amount of players you look at and think they're really good players for Everton. I think it's really easy for Sean Dyche to come out and moan at them, because ultimately we're watching a lot of them thinking, you know, the likes of the Corey, you shouldn't be on the pitch. Mikalenko, you shouldn't be on the pitch. It's all in one big pile of shit for us, and I think he's very lucky to be able to rely upon other things that are going on when we watch them on the pitch here. Because let's face it, there are plenty of players who aren't doing well enough anyway, regardless of how Everton play.
Now, the thing with that is, for me, is he's obviously one of these managers who'll sort of go on self-preservation mode quite early on, which is what he's been doing. He digs out the players. But when you've been here for as long as he has now, and when you've seen as many transfer windows as he has now, and Kevin Thelwell, let's not forget him, this squad shouldn't be in a position where the options are that limited, whereby we've got one left back who's been playing really, really bad, and we've got no one to replace him, whereby we've got a set of forwards who can't string a pass together or create a chance or get a shot on target against, let's face it, that was Bournemouth on an off day there. If they're in seventh place, they can't have played much worse than that this season if they're that high up the table. And notwithstanding his comments, I'm just going to go to the stats that Rodger sent us that were on Match Today at the weekend. This is the thing that should get him the sack. 8 points out the last 30. What is it? 5 goals scored in that time, 2 of which were own goals against an absolutely diabolical Wolves team. Had we played Wolves 3 weeks later, we wouldn't have beat them.
No.
It's as simple as that, isn't it? They were just dreadful, and the manager was at the end of his tether and had lost it completely. So those stats alone,
8 games out of the last 10 in which we haven't scored.
Yeah. And I haven't got the stats on how many shots we've had in those games, but you can probably count them on one hand.
Well, I can tell you we've had 216 shots this season, and that's 18th in the bloody league. So that's relegation. We've had 15 goals. That makes us 19th. Yeah. I mean, what's really worrying is Dyche twitters on about, quality of chances, quality of chances. Well, I can tell you the quality of the chances is clearly shit, because our shot conversion is 6.9%, which makes us 19th. And our XG is 18. So actually, we should have scored more goals than we actually have done. So what are we doing on coaching? We talk to Gary Birtles. We don't do coaching. We're 18th, 19th, 20th in all of these stats. I mean, I think what really worries me now, and we've got new owners, and I'd like to see something change. And for the club to be spouting this nonsense, this absolute nonsense that's on the website and on their Twitter feeds with rallying cries and the manager being frustrated. I appreciate they don't want to come out and announce what their plan is, but they should change the narrative, change the way the club communicates, not try and make it all kind of, it was so frustrating and we're going to try harder and just get behind us. Let's change all of this nonsense where the club goes in on itself and has this sort of bunker mentality when really there's nothing to defend. It's indefensible what's going on, the quality of the football that's being served up. And if the Friedkins could do one thing, it would be to change that monotonous bullshit narrative which the club goes into at these times when the manager's clearly under pressure, and the club stands by them for far too long and justifies the indefensible. It makes me quite cross.
It does feel like, and we've spoken about this, that in the last couple of podcasts we've done, that if we lose the next 2 games, maybe take Peterborough out of that. Where do we stand now? Sean Dyche said on Match of the Day again, it was a really tight game. First half, we were not at the races and I made some changes. I thought we had a stronger performance second half and we asked some questions. Not entirely sure what those questions were. But maybe one of the questions was, what was Mikalenko doing on the pitch? I don't know. I don't know what the questions were. But when he's coming out with that, and you kind of think he's already said he's not going to change anything. So how can anyone, Dave, at the club sort of just stand by and watch this happen? Because it feels like, these next two games now are crucial, and they are two really difficult games. Let's take Peterborough out the equation. Um,
Yeah,
but
because that'll be a walk in the park, won't it? We'll be 5-0 up
but
by
know what I
half
mean is
time.
though, if we get beat there, I mean that adds a whole other layer. But let's just look at the league games, and because the thing you might put out a weakened team against Peterborough, it's I don't know. Let's just take that out of the equation for a second. Let's just look at those league games. If he's got those league games to sort of steady us and get us a little bit further up the table and get a bit of breathing space from those relegation spots. How is he going to do that in those two games? I know it's not played on paper. I know we got those three draws against like City, Arsenal, and Chelsea. So anything can happen in theory. But with this team, it just feels like it's not going to. The best we're going to get to draw, or we're going to draw those games, which it's not enough now.
Mm. I mean, there's a bit of a conundrum for us as fans here because personally, don't give a shit about Thursday. I don't. It doesn't bother me whatsoever here, and it's a really shame to say that we've said that over the years, haven't we? Sadly, you need to focus on staying in the Premier League. I think many people get that tattooed on them because it happened
Would
that
that no,
often.
Dave? Would that not though? If we did go out on Thursday, would that not be pretty catastrophic for the feeling around the club?
It'd
I
be
mean,
catastrophic. Well, the thing is, Les, that they come hand in hand. Sorry to interrupt, mate, but they come hand in hand in that. Unfortunately, Everton need to get worse for Sean Dyche to go, and that is a really difficult scenario, a different narrative for us to cope with as fans, because you'll see a lot of different facets of the fan groups who are saying, "Oh, you've still got to get behind the team." When it's, I'm not saying it's factual that we have to lose those games in order for him to go, but it very much looks that way, doesn't it? For all of us, it's untenable now. For the owners, it's obviously not, and everybody else at the club really. You see many people saying we need a CEO before you can sack him. That's not true. They can sack him today if they wanted to. It's their football club now. Um, the Peterborough game there, we're at a scenario which is very old school in which to say we could do without more games because we need to concentrate on the league ones. And that's why it's such a crying shame that I mean, the perfect scenario is you win against Peterborough and Everton go on this fantastic run because you're playing a load of lower league shite all the way to get to the final. That's something that we'd all be delighted about there, regardless of the Premier League scenario. But look, that's not going to happen, is it? Because you're not going to carry on playing sides down in Peterborough's division and whatnot.
I don't know. We might
Um,
soon.
yeah, yeah, that's a good point. But if you look at Spurs and Villa, um, if he loses those two, he will get sacked. That I put my house on that. He will get sacked if he loses those two. Now, if it has to take that to get somebody else in, none of us as fans want Everton to lose games, but that is the only feeling towards if we lost them. Yeah, well, to take another scenario, if we went and won those two games, where does that put his position for you? Because he's not going anywhere if Everton go and win those two games. And nonetheless, we'll still be screaming for him to get sacked. And that's why things are so difficult right now in all of this.
Yeah, I think for me, if we win those two games, we potentially need two more wins to stay up then. So I'd be happy. I am happy for him to ride out the season. If it means we stay up and we get better and we start again in the summer, I'm happy for him. As grim as it is, I'm happy for that. For him to ride out the season, we stay up, we start again in the summer, and we do it properly. We don't have any interim manager muddying the waters like I think we spoke about on Mailbag on Friday. We don't have an interim manager to sort of muddy the waters and then get to summer and think, oh, what do we do with him if he comes in and keeps us up? So I think if we won those two games, yeah, I don't want us to lose games. I really don't want to be in a position where we're thinking, well, if we get BT goes after this one, if we get BT goes after this one, then we get in the Frank Lampard situation where then you kind of are thinking, just fucking lose, so he goes. And it's horrible. It's the worst situation to be in, isn't it? So I think if we did win those two games, we'd be quite happy if he did then stay and just kept us up. But again, there's no guarantees that could be a blip in the season.
I
And
think that you're right what you're saying there because look, the perfect scenario there is you go and win those games and lose. I don't know if you went and lost the derby whenever that is, then that's another opportunity you've got to get rid of him. If he wins games, he's not going to get sacked. That's pretty obvious, isn't it? But if you go with what you said to do there, the perfect way in life is that he gets Everton safe as soon as possible. We go in this woeful run of games in which you can sack him before the end of the season, and therefore start that new slate, whatever you want to call it, before the summer begins.
hmm,
But then I'd turn to the question of how confident are you that Everton get a point two?
no.
Don't lose those two games coming up because it's not something that I'd be looking at thinking, do you know what, we'll be unbeaten when we've played those two sides at Goodison.
What's
I
it?
think he's
Go
he's
on,
he's
sorry.
got this perfect. He's doing a great job at not losing his job,
Yeah.
because if we lose, he's always got an excuse. Um, the Man United drubbing, that disgraceful 4-0 performance was, oh, new manager bounce. Oh dear, it happens all the time, right? And then he follows that up with a quite fluky, well-timed to play Wolves win. Every other game, he's got these, oh, look at us getting draws at Arsenal, aren't we brilliant? And we scored a goal against Man City. And he's always got an excuse. And that is the only part of his job that he's doing well. Somehow he has the mainstream media on his side. Even this bloody match of the day nonsense. They said, well, Everton have only lost whatever it is, 2 in 10 or whatever the nonsense it is. And they got those 3 great draws, and they only recently lost to high flying Nottingham Forest, because they're high flying and we would expect to lose to them. This is not about people. This is not about personalities. This is not personal. Everton Football Club need to stay in the Premier League, and I believe our chances of staying in the Premier League are improved without Sean Dyche.
Yeah.
And if he proves me wrong, great. That's absolutely marvellous. But I tell you what, this team under him playing this way isn't getting 32, 34 points. It's not happening because we can't win games. Why? Because we can't score goals. Why? Because he doesn't set us up to score goals, and he doesn't coach, and he doesn't develop. And Thelwell's provided him with absolute bag of nails to play. I mean, Beto, come on. It's ridiculous. Beto, Lindstrom, these players aren't good enough. Jack Harrison, they're not good enough. It isn't all Sean's fault, but boy, he's not getting the best out of a bag of nails of a bunch of players. It's such an impossible situation. But these owners have to act. I mean, I heard some idea that, oh, let's bring Seamus and Leighton Baines in, and that'll get everyone behind us. Stop it. No, we need a proper coach. Yeah. That's what we haven't had. We have not had a coach. We've had managers, ego-driven managers, and we need coaches who are going to improve the players, bring in players who suit their style of play, and start playing entertaining football, which, wouldn't you know it, often leads to winning games.
Well, that's it, isn't it? The club needs to do something different now. It needs to, like we keep saying, we need this clean slate. We need to stop being so insular. We need to stop looking back. Now, there's been a lot of talk about David Moyes coming back. Whether he'd do a good job, I don't know. It does feel like anyone would do a better job than Sean Dyche with this squad of players, which isn't the best squad of players by any stretch of the imagination.
It's his best squad of players, the list.
I suppose it is his best squad of players, yeah, but he's not finding a way to create chances. Like you said, Rog, he's come up with some mad comments about you can't train forwards. Gary Birtle stuff was bizarre. I just want to go into a little bit of a tangent with this in a minute because I'm quite sick of all the just talking like being down about everything. So I'm going to take a little look back at some past managers on the back of Sean Dyche's comments of the run really isn't bad on paper if you add wins to it, which I think is the most incredible. Like you said before, Dave, that's probably the most incredible comment of any Everton manager ever. And we have had some managers who talked some shit. So, can you tell me which Everton manager said this? That's a home
Martinez.
win. I've got some quotes. Who was that? Who?
I just said Martinez. It had to be.
Oh, not quite. That's a home win and away win. that's a home win and an away draw inside 4 days. We've only got one more game in November, and if we win that, I'm in grave danger of becoming manager of the month. Who was that?
Big Sam, I'm going for.
Rog?
Truman.
Mike Walker.
Oh my God.
Oh,
4 days before Everton
wow.
sacked him in November 1994.
Mm.
We created enough chances to win the game. The fearful aspect of our performance was a real shame.
I'm saying Allardyce.
Benitez.
Allardyce has got to be one of these. Big Sam.
That was Roberto Martinez after we got
A
beat
mile
2-1 by
away.
Swansea. But it did sound very, very Sean Dyche, that to be honest. Um, I don't believe in soft tissue injuries. If you get a soft tissue injury in football, a mistake has been made.
Soft tissue.
Allardyce.
That was Roberto Martinez as well.
Again.
Yeah, even though he was
Hang
actually a
on.
physio, but
Can we
soft
just
tissue.
can you stop this, Les? Because it's actually making Sean Dyche look okay.
Well, this is the cycle we need to get out of, isn't it? Like picking these head case managers. I've actually got the full Roberto Martinez parasite quote as well. So he says, I believe the game should be played in a specific manner, taking risks, getting on the ball, and relying on the talent of the players to score goals rather than systems and dead ball situations. That was the weird bit for me. Keeping clean sheets and not taking risks. Unfortunately, you get too many managers achieving success with another type of football. You can analyse teams over history, and there are parasite teams. There are certain styles that guarantee you 40 points. That's success. Unfortunately, you have other young managers trying to play the right way, and they get relegated. Football is not right in those moments. That's the first time I've seen that quote in full, I think. And I kind of get where he's coming from because Everton have become that parasite team, haven't they? Sean Dyche is one of those parasite managers.
Well,
I'd
I'd
have
snap
that
your
now.
arm off
Yeah,
for 40
exactly. You're
points.
spot
I'll
on.
take 40 points. Good God. That
Yeah,
would be joyous.
40 points would get you to 14 these days.
yeah.
40
Mm.
points. And again, I reiterate, it's incredibly fortunate that um, not only the three sides, which is cliche, that have came up in the last 2 years have been absolutely shite. The fact of the matter is that you need maybe 33, 34 to stay in the division, which we can just about manage. Which Sean Dyche will sell to everybody and say this is why I'm such a good manager in the Premier League level. But what you've said there, what Martinez has said there, I take a lot on that in the context of what Sean Dyche is like. Because for Martinez, for his troubles towards the second and third seasons that he had with us, that first year sadly feels magical when you look back
Yeah.
on it compared to everything else we've had since then. And look, this squad we've got now couldn't play like that. It doesn't hold a candle against that side we had back then. When you think of Barkley at his best and everyone that was in there, Lukaku, all of that sort of thing. He should have been getting better of that back in that day. But what he's saying there is perfectly relevant to the situation you see Everton in right now.
Well, if you look at it, you can see quite clearly now the timeline. It's just been a continuous downward spiral, hasn't it? Of selling players, replacing them with inferior players year after year after year, selling players, replacing them at loan signings, to where we are in the situation where we are now. Last few minutes, and this is going to be the title of the podcast. How do we get out of it? Because I think the only way we get out of it is to replace the manager. With who? I don't know. But is that the only feasible way? Because he said he's not going to change anything.
I'm actually not sure we can get out of it, Les.
Okay.
I'm not sure we can, because I think the squad's really poor for a start. I've seen an article in the Eye earlier where somebody has said this is undoubtedly the worst squad in the Premier League, but you have to take Southampton out of it. I think we've got some really, really poor players, particularly at the top of the pitch. But if we are to get out of it, and not to end the last season at Goodison Park being relegated, which would be just absolutely disgraceful, then we have to change, and we have to change everything, and we have to change it now. We have to get rid of Thelwell, and we have to get rid of Sean Dyche, and we have to get a new director of football, and he has to appoint a coach. And all of these things can be done quite quickly, because we are still a Premier League club. We're an ever-present Premier League club. We've got a great history and all of this shit that I don't like us going on about, but we are, and we should be attractive to people. And we've got a brand new shiny stadium. Go and get us a proper manager who can just get us into 10th, 12th, quite comfortably for a couple of seasons, bed in some new players, make some sensible signings, and develop the academy. Every single aspect of the footballing operations at Everton are failing. and anyone working in those areas should now leave the club. That's my opinion. Everyone, it's collective responsibility. Dyche and his coaching team clearly don't coach. He's told us that. Thirlwell is buying rubbish players, and the academy isn't producing anything of any value that can come and play in the first team, or the manager's not prepared to play them. Maybe he'll throw a few kids in Thursday night, but it has to be change. It has to be drastic change, and it has to be now.
Dave, do you agree?
Yeah, I agree. I think sack him immediately. I think open the front door and tell any manager in the game of football that's a professional to bring the CV, and everybody assesses it and picks the one that has the best option of keeping Everton. Has the best CV of keeping clubs in the Premier League, which is sort of funny because Sean Dyche should probably be the top of that list if we go back 2 years. But you need somebody who changes Everton. You need somebody who does that quickly. Yep. As well, you give them a contract till the end of this season, with a view to an additional year, providing they keep Everton in the Premier League, something like that gets you a decent enough manager. If not, and I'm probably looking straight in the eye at David Moyes, because again, I think he'd come back to Everton if you told him to walk barefooted from wherever he is, and he'd take any sort of return that there was to be the Everton manager once again. I wouldn't be against that. I'm more than happy. I mean, there's an interesting philosophy, if you like, to what's happened with David Moyes and fans' views on him over the years and what he said and what's been and gone. You know, knife to a gunfight and all that crap doesn't matter anymore. It shouldn't take for anybody's opinion on the. He did a really good job at West Ham. He had issues at West Ham. He went and won a trophy at West Ham, and more importantly, West Ham did not get relegated. I'd take him, and like I say, I'd open the front door and say, "Welcome. This is a this is a career drive. Rock up to ours. Give us your CV. Say a few nice answers to us, and then we'll pick which one's the best, the most efficient to keep us in the league."
Yeah, it does feel the club need to act sooner rather than later. When we play Villa, by the way, Leicester have got Palace at home, Ipswich have got Brighton at home, and Wolves have got Newcastle away. And then when we play Spurs, Ipswich have got Man City at home, Leicester have got Fulham at home, and Wolves have got Chelsea away. So anything could happen in that. We will leave it there for this week's Blue Monday. Thanks to Rog, thanks to Dave. Hopefully the club will do something sooner rather than later. Thanks for watching. We'll catch you next time. Up the toffees.